Today, we're gonna compare two of the most popular JRPGs on the PlayStation 2 by the two most popular JRPG franchises of all time. And that is, we got Dragon Quest VIII versus Final Fantasy XII. Any version, okay? These are two legendary games. Final Fantasy XII is pretty controversial. It's got a lot of detractors. So I think the outcome is going to be pretty predictable, but I still would like to see some arguments defending Final Fantasy XII or criticizing Final Fantasy XII. So, start. Lou says, Dragon Quest VIII is a more complete game. Overall, far better story, perfect combat system, skill development, did bigger things for its franchise. Okay. Interesting. Kevin Lewis says, I get what Square was doing with the Gambit system, like it was a spiritual predecessor to the combat system of Xenoblade Chronicles series, but looking back, Final Fantasy XII did not age well. Have you played the remaster? They fixed the Gambit system. Tensations says, Dragon Quest VIII pushed the series into 3D and improved a ton on aspects such as character interactions and development. 12 felt somewhat lacking in terms of overall series growth and progression. That's a really interesting argument. No Face Y'all says, Dragon Quest VIII was the biggest jump in the technology. Game had orchestral music, which wasn't common for games at the time. Marvelous from start to finish. Impressive game scope, even versus Final Fantasy XII. Okay. Mystery Kid says, if it's the battle system, Dragon Quest seems better, and the art style look of the world of Dragon Quest VIII was more colorful. Okay, a good point about the graphics and the battle system. I understand the battle system in Final Fantasy XII is not for everybody. Melphis Sky says, I think overall Dragon Quest VIII is better. It's a better game. It has better characters, better gameplay, superior voice acting, and the story is fun, and I love the art style. Okay, that's a pretty personal take on the game. New Comb Oil Incorporated Eastview. What kind of username is that, man? Is that the name of your company? He says the problem with Final Fantasy XII is that Yasumi Matsuno left 1 year before release, so the continuous development changed everything he did. I couldn't agree more. So Jay says, I voted Final Fantasy XII because it tried to innovate. The Gambit system is great and the world is huge. Oh, and you're a big fan of Fran. Okay, man. Christopher Bullock says, Final Fantasy XII feels full and lived in. Dragon Quest VIII world feels cartoony. I remember the first time playing it and getting lost. I just love how big the world feels. Final Fantasy XII feels like more of an adult game. Oh wow, another argument in favor of Final Fantasy XII, and that's a compelling argument. I also want to say something about being more of a mature game. Last Dragoon says, although the original Final Fantasy XII Gambit system was pretty bad, but the remastered version fixed that issue for me. Yes, it did. I also think that Final Fantasy XII side characters are also very well written. Not only the side characters, all characters, that's what I think, except Vaughn and Penelo. Those are just there just for the sake of being there. But every other character apart from them, I agree, it's very well written. Felix Salazar says, Final Fantasy XII is a transition game and a change in the perspective of Final Fantasy games. And Dragon Quest VIII is the same history of Dragon Quest games on new capabilities. New Comb Oil says now, I do like Final Fantasy XII battle system. If you did not build your gambits correct, you will struggle against bosses, unlike in Dragon Quest VIII. You choose level up if you had a hard time against bosses. So it's a pretty straightforward game, more linear, more simple, Okay. Wow, okay. The Last of Us says, Final Fantasy XII has some memorable and unforgettable boss battles and equipment for me. I enjoyed how they handled the loot and the equipment system. A guide really helps fully enjoy it. Okay, so in other words, it has better gameplay mechanics than Dragon Quest VIII. So Interlocutor says Final Fantasy XII is best because of the political plotline, MMO-esque battle system, character development, and art style. Okay, fair enough. There we go. That's the ending of the poll. Dragon Quest VIII won with 57%, while Final Fantasy XII lost with 43%, based on 83 votes. Wow! Okay, so I'm gonna make my own argument now, and Well, you know how I've been preaching for a few years how I prefer political, more adult, mature plots, and just because of that, I'm picking Final Fantasy XII. But check this out, I have a lot of trouble deciding which one is the better game. Man, so starting with the story, yeah, okay, I prefer Final Fantasy XII. The story in Dragon Quest VIII, I'll be completely honest with you, is just very, someone was saying cartoonish and childish, and it's a game that I think a lot of kids could play and easily understand, and there's nothing wrong with that. I respect that, I like that too, but I just tend to give preference, and I've said this before in previous Versus episodes and in previous videos that I've done in my life, that I tend to give preference to more adult stories, more mature. And yeah, what can I say, man? I'm nearing 40 years old. I just don't find it appealing to get into the teenagers group saving the world cliche. I still like some RPGs. Some of my favorite RPGs of all time follow that same cliche, you know, and I like it. But I prefer storytelling and narratives like in Final Fantasy XII. It's just more mature, more dark, more... It's just easier for me to relate to a story like that than the one on Dragon Quest VIII. But despite having Vaan and Penelo, I still prefer the Final Fantasy XII story by a landslide, because if I can just focus, which is exactly what I did, on the rest of the cast, someone said before that apart from Vaan and Penelo, the entirety of the cast, the other characters are very well written, and I agree with that. And yeah, I know in terms of fan service, I think Final Fantasy XII is one of the most sexualized games in history. I mean, the races that are in this game are like, come on, barely wearing any clothes. I know Jessica has 2 big reasons to be one of the best fan service female characters in history, but yeah, I think I'm gonna pick Ash and Fran when it comes to fan service. Anyway, yeah. And about the world and the universe, again, Final Fantasy XII wins by a landslide. I'm a big fan of Yasumi Matsuno and what he did with the universe of Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy Tactics and Vagrant Story even. I'm not a fan of Vagrant Story, but I think I prefer that world over the one in Dragon Quest VIII because, again, the world in Dragon Quest VIII is more simple, is more done in the Akira Toriyama style. There's some magic and fantasy involved, some steampunk, some dark moments here and there, but it's just a game it's a friendly game, it's a friendly story with a friendly world. Whereas the one in Final Fantasy XII is just huge, the lore is fantastic, it's just very well carefully crafted and developed. In terms of gameplay, this is where I'm having trouble deciding. To be honest, there's a lot of ups and downs with both. Both games are a massive grind fest, and grinding was great for its time, but these two are something freaking else. Okay, these are 2 of the biggest grind fests I've ever played in my life. Especially the original versions. And I can't decide in terms of that which is the better game or which is the worst game. When it comes to gameplay, you know, the exploration, the going around, exploring things, moving around, how the control feels, controlling your characters, you know, the quality of life improvements maybe. Again, you know, both have so many ups and downs that I can't decide. The best thing about Final Fantasy XII is the fact that you can just freely roam around without getting into random battles. And Dragon Quest VIII has random battles, random encounters, and I've always been a detractor of random encounters since I was little. I hate them, and I think they shouldn't exist anymore. But so, the gameplay is just as great in both, but they're also so different, right? Someone was saying that Final Fantasy XII feels more like an MMORPG than anything, and yes, that's true, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, it's more like massive, more open worldish, and you can get lost so many times. It takes forever to reach, to go from point A to point B, and whereas in Dragon Quest VIII is easier. But so that it's a point in favor of Dragon Quest VIII. But Dragon Quest VIII has the random encounter. So you see what I'm trying to say? I can't decide which game has the better gameplay, and gameplay is the most important thing. Music and graphics are vastly different. You got the orchestration of Dragon Quest VIII, which is fucking beautiful. And I love Hitoshi Sakimoto, don't take me wrong, but I've never been the biggest fan of his music. Not even in Odin Sphere. So, I think in music Dragon Quest VIII wins. Not by much, but yeah, by a considerable amount. Music is better in Dragon Quest VIII. But then again, I'm not the biggest fan of Koichi Sugiyama's music. Since I was little, I was like, the music is good, but I'm not... You know, I mean, we're listening to some East music right now. That's the type of music I give preference to in video games. The graphics look freaking beautiful in Dragon Quest VIII. I'm a big fan of the cel shading graphics. But Final Fantasy XII, I mean, there was just so much detail, but the original version looks kind of rough and grayish and not too colorful. But it's just something more mature, more realistic, and more... I don't know. Again, the graphics I can't decide. We're just trying to compare two completely different styles here, and I just can't make a decision. And finally, in terms of battle mechanics, well, Dragon Quest is this extremely simplified version, like any other Dragon Quest game in existence, just a menu-based, turn-based RPG. And yeah, you get these, I forget the term, you get like this energized feature where you're gonna do on your next turn some big damage or something like that. I forget the name of that characteristic, but it's okay, you know, it's good. Whereas in Final Fantasy XII, you got this weird battle mechanic that resembles more an MMORPG. Like, it's real time, it's action, but everybody still gotta wait for the bar to fill up to execute their attack, and you're only controlling one character. Well, you don't really feel like you're controlling one character, right? But again, there's so much thought put into the battle mechanics of Final Fantasy XII that it's kind of better. So yeah, to me, people, I'm picking Final Fantasy XII for everything that I said in the last 5 minutes. What do you think? Leave a comment, share your opinion. Which game is the better game for you? Let us know. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. And see you in the next episode.